Hello and welcome to episode 292 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, big oil is counting on the growth of petrochemicals used in single-use plastics as EVs cut into their demand. But a new study shows if we cut single-use plastics by 70%, it's actually big oil who will end up in the landfill.
A new study says households in British Columbia, Canada could save $675 million a year if everyone switched to electric heat pumps. This could be the largest new adoption of anything in BC since everyone started wearing Lululemon.
U.S. EV startup Rivian is planning autonomous driving vehicles that will pick up your dry cleaning and take itself to the garage for servicing if needed. I'm hoping it'll also go get help if I ever fall into a well.
You could call it Lassie. Australians are installing home batteries at an incredibly fast rate. This is the fastest adoption of anything in Australia since, well, Lululemon.
All that and much more in this edition of the Clean Energy Show.
So last week, I think it was, we had a letter from probably Eric in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
It's always a topic of discussion when somebody wants to keep nuclear plants operating or coal plants or anything. And of course, you know, a lot of people think we should just shut down the nuclear. And I used my catchphrase, there's no right answer. But it made me think, well, what is the hierarchy of power? Because the point of those who want to keep the existing nuclear running is, well, it's better than fossil fuels. The problem is if you shut down an existing nuclear power plant, you may be, adding natural gas or coal to the grid. So I don't know, existing nuclear, it kind of ends up in the middle of the pack if you think about what all of the different power sources are in the grid. And so like the worst thing you can do on the grid would be to build a new coal power plant. Like that's the absolute worst thing you can do. And that is unfortunately still happening in a very small way in certain places around the world. But that's the worst thing because you're spending a bunch of money for something that we shouldn't be using in the first place. Or if we are using it, we should be figuring out how to shut it down as quickly as possible. It made me think like new natural gas plants would then be the second worst thing. And we just built one here in our province at, the cost of something like $700 million, a new natural gas power plant. That is the second worst thing you could possibly be doing on the grid when it comes to all these options. And, then things like existing hydropower and existing nuclear, I think, would be somewhere in the middle of the pack. Like coal is worse. New hydropower is probably not a good idea because we know that there tends to be environmental consequences from building these hydro dams. But, a lot of them were built decades ago and we might as well keep using them since they're already there.
Well, I think people like Eric would argue against that. His point of view is that nuclear is dangerous, and some people have that point of view, and some people have the opposite point of view.
And my point of view is digging up oil and burning it is the absolute most dangerous thing.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's insane that we do that.
And not in that nuclear meltdown kind of way, but in the, warming the planet until it's unlivable kind of way.
And before we get back to you, I just want to say that on Patreon, we had a poll of your 3 catchphrases from last week.
Yeah.
And the winner by far was Beeve's Gonna Beeve, referring to beavers. So if we want to put that on a shirt, it may not make any sense by the time the shirt gets printed.
I don't think so, no.
It is a true statement.
I would buy that shirt, put it in a drawer, then 5 years from now, I'd be like, what does that mean?
5 years? I think a month from now, you'd be like that. But H said on Patreon, there is no right answer is a good one. And that was one of your other catchphrases. His good catchphrase, Brian. He says, I also like perfect is the enemy of good enough.
Yeah. And I use that one sometimes as well. People sometimes get obsessed with doing things perfectly. And sure, if we're going to do things perfectly, shut down the existing nuclear power plants. But, then we're just going to have a power shortfall. So there is no right answer.
So yesterday I was minding my own business, going to start the cars for my family in the midst of winter here. And a guy was walking his dog and happened to meet me outside the front of my house. He says, are those electric cars? And I said, yes. And he said, do you like them? And I said, yeah, we like them. And we like them a lot. And I was kind of caught off guard, but I wanted to sell him on the idea. And he says, you got panels on your roof. Do those go right into the car? And I kind of thought about it and said, what's the right answer here?
Yeah.
Is what's he thinking about that? And I could replay it on my doorbell cam to see, and I still don't know. But yeah, I kind of said, we have a small roof and it does about 17,000 kilometers worth of driving in cars, which pointed out. And he said, I'm thinking about getting one. So, I didn't offer, but I thought later I should have offered, if you need any help, stop by again. And I'm sure he's walking around. He also said, do those things heat up well? And I said, yes. And I was thinking about, him buying a car. I wasn't thinking about my cars.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, he may witness me driving my 13-year-old Leaf without a heater in it one of these days. And with all the windows froze up. And you'll think I'm a stooge or a liar, but that's not true. And Brian, I've been wanting to talk about this for a long time. I would really like to, at this time of year, this is our Dunkelflaut. This is the darkest time of the year. And also happens to be the cloudiest, and it's certainly not the least windiest right now as far as renewable energy goes. But they might actually have to shut down. Alberta had 115-kilometer gusts yesterday with this system that's moving in, and we're going to get a blizzard tomorrow. I was thinking I'd like to buy a bifacial solar panel and do some tests on it to see if the Saskatchewan government, that's the province where we live in Canada, who doesn't like renewables, and England, basically the same, place on the planet as us and much cloudier. And they've got a lot of solar there compared to here, and they're planning a lot more. And it makes me mad. So I was thinking of, doing like an almost vertical, basically the ideal for this time of year, the darkest time of the year, to put it, it's almost straight up, but not quite because of the angle of the sun. Just seeing what it does and seeing what the capacity factor is for it, how much energy it produces based on its rating. And I'm just not sure what to buy for that, but I'm not going to get it done this year. And next year I might be in, doing medical things and not be able to do it then either. But I promise I will do it one of these days. And it's something I want to do. And speaking of projects, the indoor air quality monitor that I bought and put outdoors because it measures VOCs on a 0 to 100 scale, it's working in minus 30 Celsius.
Wow.
So just to let everyone know.
Yeah.
And Brian, there's a lot of bad news in our world lately. And I can't, we try to focus on the positive stories of clean energy, but man, there's a lot of headwinds right now from stupid things. But the person in charge of the buses in the city where we live, Regina, Saskatchewan, says that the electric buses they got are no good. They went to city council and said they're no good. They work for 1.5 hours in cold weather. I questioned the buses they bought, and I had some pushback on Facebook from some people who maybe knew better, or I assume knew better, that said these buses were ones that were working fine elsewhere and were good choices. And because sometimes, they don't buy the right buses, they buy them from startups or things that are not proven. But it seems ludicrous to me because Calgary and Edmonton, next door in Alberta, they're not as cold because they get more of these Chinooks than us overall, but generally they can be easily as cold or colder than us, especially Edmonton. And they're going strong, 100% buses, basically, is what they're going on. And Edmonton's had them for a few years as a pilot, and they're working fine there, fine enough to get more and to continue on with the program. So I don't know what's going on. There's a lot of ignorance around, a lot of assumptions, a lot of, hey, I told you so, they only work for an hour and a half. I don't see how that's possible. Now, it takes a lot to heat a bus, a school bus or a transit bus, because there's such big compartments. I mean, it's in our cars, and even in your Model Y, which is a small SUV, there's not a lot of cubic air to heat, but it still takes up a lot of your battery when it gets very cold. Same for me. Yeah. And a bus is much worse than that. But there are workarounds. There's heating the floor so the heat radiates up. It's more efficient that way because that's where the people are. Yeah. Diesel heaters are often employed on these buses. And there was a fire on a electric school bus in Quebec a couple of months ago at the beginning of the school year. And of course, people blamed it on being a battery bus, but it was the diesel heater that actually started the fire. So I don't know about that. And it's kind of discouraging. There's many things are discouraging here. Also, I wanted to just interject that Petro-Canada has just announced, that's the Canada-wide gas station network owned by the oil sands company Suncor. They've had the first to have the high-speed charging for EVs across Canada. They sucked. Yeah. And a couple of years ago, we did a survey of all of them on PlugShare, and only like 10 or 12% of them were working well. It was really bad. People stopped using them. But now more and more people who don't have Teslas are buying fast charging cars. There's a lot more faster charging cars that could use their chargers that went up to 350 kilowatts of charging, which is pretty good, faster than Tesla even theoretically. But they just didn't work. And now they're promising that all of them have been refurbished with new equipment, new EV charging hardware or digital capability. Sometimes you couldn't connect to, the payment services to pay for it. That was the issue.
Yeah.
That's just wanted to point that out.
They maybe got in too early in a way and didn't have a reliable system before they started to roll it out. All right, this is from Clean Energy Canada. A switch to heat pumps in the province of BC in Canada would save households $675 million a year with reduced grid demand and emissions, which seems too good to be true.
Yeah, how does that happen? How do you go from natural gas burning for heating to electricity, which is efficient compared to regular electricity, but are a lot of people using the old kind of electricity because it doesn't get that cold there?
Yeah, so in a place like BC, it's Canada, so of course they have winter and it does get cold, but it is mild compared to most places in Canada. So yeah, in a climate like that, people have often installed electric baseboard heaters because they don't need as much heat as somebody else, and those are the least efficient way to heat your house. So the study says that people with that, like electric baseboard heat, would save about $1,000 a year. And if you've got a natural gas furnace, you'd save $358 a year. But the thing that just struck me the most was they think it would actually be reduced grid demand because of this, because you would also be, in this theoretical case, removing everybody's fossil fuel furnaces and removing their traditional standalone air conditioners, because heat pumps they work as heating and cooling, and they're more efficient than a regular standalone air conditioner. So in this theoretical case of replacing every single home in BC, it would actually mean reduced use on the grid overall, which I thought was quite surprising.
Who did the study here?
This is Clean Energy Canada. Clean Energy
Canada did this report. Okay.
Yeah.
Not associated with the show, by the way.
No. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
And now this isn't going to work for every jurisdiction because BC has some unique advantages. As far as Canada goes, it's warmer than a lot of places in Canada, especially along the coast. The interior of BC, though, would get quite cold. But, they traditionally have very cheap power in BC, which we've mentioned before on the show. They have hydropower that's been installed for decades, and, they have some of the cheapest power in the world at around 6 cents Canadian per kilowatt hour. And so, yeah, that's part of what makes this possible. So the numbers aren't going to work exactly like this for other places, but that's absolutely fascinating. $675 million a year in savings on heating and cooling.
Why doesn't the utility and government do these studies? Why do they have to rely on an organization?
Yeah.
Donations.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. But through this report, of course, they're, making proposals to the government because, once you recognize this fact, well, then you have to try and make it happen through subsidies, through better regulations, through reduced red tape. So those are the recommendations that they're making to government as a result of this report. And I don't know, it seems like a no-brainer since that's what the numbers say. And even if they're off a little bit, maybe the savings are half that good. That's still a savings of $300 million a year, which is crazy good.
And when the emissions go down, that's a good thing. So I'm guessing that because they are a mild climate, a coastal climate, that people, and with really cheap electricity, that people just went for resistive electric heating a lot more than they might have, here. It exists here, but it's not too common at all where it gets very cold.
No, and it exists in Ontario too, which you wouldn't expect. Ontario's a bit colder, but back in the day in Ontario, they kind of had a ton of power, like when they first built their nuclear power plants in Ontario. So there was a time in Ontario, maybe in the 70s, that they actually encouraged people to put in electric resistive heat.
They got to use up this nuke.
Yeah, because they've got to use up the nuke, and their power was fairly cheap at the time. But yeah, CO2 emissions is the other big thing in this. If BC switched to this, the equivalent of taking 800,000 gas-powered cars off the road if everybody in BC switched to a heat pump. Oh, and of course, the climate, which we mentioned many times, they're now getting heat events in BC that they never used to get. So a lot of people don't have air conditioning there because they haven't traditionally needed it. Well, guess what? They now get these heat domes where people are dying because it's too hot and their homes are too hot. They're not being cooled.
Yeah.
So that would be the other benefit of this program. Everybody would get cooling.
I spent 2 weeks there sweating in the summer. It was hotter there than it was here. The humidity's a little higher usually. So yeah, I didn't care for that. And there was no air conditioning in my son's brand new building.
Yeah.
It's a 6-story, I don't know, couple hundred people in there.
Yeah.
No air conditioning because they didn't feel they need it. No screens in the windows too. I've said that before.
Yeah.
I can't get over that. But there are bugs. Not many.
Yeah.
But these heat domes are becoming a regular thing now that you have to prepare for. And we were looking at this before in the show, how little air conditioning penetration there is in BC. And how that has, I think it's under 10%, or it was under 10%, and that's changing rapidly now. But these window air conditioners, not as efficient as a heat pump, which is like central air conditioning, but works two ways. It can heat or cool. It transfers heat, or takes the heat out and moves it outside, takes the heat from outdoors, moves it inside, regardless of how much energy is in that air, as long as it's, above -15 would probably work quite efficiently for a heat pump. And I don't think it barely gets below freezing, in a lot of Vancouver. So, yeah, it's not good when it does. Right now, they're getting drenched, as is Washington State, with what they call atmospheric rivers. 3 of them or 4 of them, it's like one after another. And
wow,
we've talked about it before in the show that climate scientists said that these things are happening more often and worse because of climate change. And I'm sure we'll hear about that after these events are over and they've had some time to look at that. But that is almost everyone in the world is facing worse climates right now. And it only gets worse from here, no matter what. I want to talk about single-use plastics and oil demand because we live in a petro-state country here, and then we live in the part of that country, Canada, that has gas and has politicians that spout a lot of nonsense that we don't agree with and we think they're very wrong about. And one of them is that, sure, there's EVs in China and other places, and we see the petrochemical demand going up. That's something that you can make from oil, or the petrochemicals that are used. You take a capsule pill and it's got petrochemicals in it. Well, a lot of petrochemical growth is in single-use plastics, in spite of many countries' governments coming up with plans to stop that from happening, to reduce single-use plastics.
Yeah.
Straws are something that's controversial with right-wing politicians. And, I can live with straws. I'm starting to get used to non-plastic straws. Now they feel kind of gross to me, actually. They all do. So I don't use straws anymore.
Yeah. Well, I told a story on the podcast a long time ago that I have a vague memory of when I was 5 years old and we got our first McDonald's here in our city. And I think that was the first time I'd ever had a plastic straw because, paper straws were common when I was a kid.
Were they?
Yeah. And you get to McDonald's and it was a plastic straw. And I have a vague memory that I thought even at the time when I was 5 years old that, this seems kind of wasteful.
It's really
a single piece of plastic that you use once. That was not a common thing back, 50 years ago.
Well, single-use plastics are made from fossil fuels, mainly oil and gas. They begin as petrochemical feedstocks tied directly to oil refining. And by the way, petrochemicals coming out of a oil refinery is worse than what I'm dealing with here.
Right.
Except it's a nasty business as far as your health is concerned if you live near one. As fuel demand flattens in the world because of electrification, oil companies are relying more on plastics to drive growth. And disposable packaging is the biggest driver of new plastic demand. About 40% of plastics are used once, often for minutes, and then thrown away. That makes single-use plastics a fast-growing source of oil compared to other things, and they put all their hopes and dreams in it now. And plastic production is energy-intensive and emits large amounts of CO2. Burning plastic waste adds even more emissions if you're going to burn plastic. Recycling barely reduces oil demand. It doesn't really work because it's not recycled. It's not like paper or other things that can be reduced the use of new things. Virgin plastic from oil is often cheaper than recycled material. So if you do recycle it, it's expensive compared to just making new stuff with oil. So cutting single-use plastics directly cuts future oil demand. And when people talk, I was wondering about alternatives to, is there anything emerging that we can use for single use? Because packaging for stuff that we buy, and you buy a salad at the store, people are cooking at home less. So even if you buy deli stuff, it comes in plastic packaging. But there's bioplastics are usually the first thing that people talk about. One of the most common is polylactic acid, or PLA. PLA is made from fermented plant sugars, usually corn or sugar cane. That's kind of like using corn for ethanol. It's not necessarily the most environmental thing in the world when it comes to emissions, even if you are replacing oil and gas. It's already used in single-use cups, cutlery, and food packaging. The catch, PLA only breaks down in industrial composting facilities that heat it really hot. Another fast-growing option is PHA, polyhydroxyalkanoates, I think. I don't know how to pronounce that, of course. What am I, a pronouncer?
PHA.
PHA. It's produced by bacteria that ferment sugars or fats. So we talk a lot about precision fermentation on the show for foods and dairy products, real stuff being artificially replicated, basically. Yeah, it's a bacteria, so it does degrade in soil, freshwater, and marine environments, so that's good. And companies like Full Cycle and Genesis are making PHA from food and agricultural waste. So if you have waste from these things, it's getting put to use instead of, growing corn for something just for this purpose. There are also starch and cellulose-based plastics. They use plant starches, wood pulp, or farm waste like bagasse, which is leftover husk from sugarcane, and rice husks. They're used for films, bags, and rigid containers. And non-plastic materials are gaining ground too. Seaweed-based packaging. Seaweed seems to do a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
You can eat it.
Yeah.
From companies like Notpla, can be edible. At least these plastics can be edible. And I've always wanted to eat my own packaging. You sit down, you have a drink at McDonald's, you can eat the cup. I'm still hungry. I think I'll eat this cup. That includes condiment packages that they're making with this stuff, drink pods, and even cutlery. Mushroom-based packaging uses mushrooms from farm waste. So they can produce sort of fake polystyrofoam type stuff. Bamboo and wood fiber. Bamboo grows fast, as you know, and can biodegrade. I call it land seaweed because it grows so fast and so plentiful. Molded pulp and paperboard. New coatings are replacing plastic linings because a lot of the stuff, if you have a drink container, it's lined with something that keeps the water or fluids from absorbing into it. And that's a big deal. So there's these coatings that are plant-based that are helping with that. But there's nothing really. It's going to take a long time, if anything actually catches on, and some strict government policy. But the reason I talk about this, Brian, is a new report from the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, otherwise known as the IEEFA. We've talked about them before in the show a few times. Looks at what happens to the petrochemical industry if single-use plastics are cut sharply. The scenario would be a 70% reduction in single-use plastics worldwide. And if this happened, petrochemicals would be in trouble. They've become a key fallback for oil and gas, as I've said. And as fuel demand weakens, plastics are supposed to carry the growth. But this report shows how fragile that strategy is. Because if we do cut it by 70%, the industry is going to fall. It's at $640 billion last year. It's grown steadily, and that growth hides a serious problem. The industry is chronically oversupplied right now, even as it is, especially in commodity plastics. An oversupply means lower operating rates, and it squeezes profit margins. So according to the report, a 70% cut, if we stopped using 70% of our single-use plastics, it would cost the industry $138 billion. And that's a massive hit to revenues across the petrochemical sector if it happened. On the energy side, the impact is just as big because that would reduce about 3.85 million barrels per day, which is a huge amount, and affects prices greatly if that were to happen. And that's directly links disposable plastics to ongoing oil demand. So think about that next time you're using single use. If governments cap production or demand keeps shrinking, financial pressure increases. So I'm not sure that the oil politicians around here are truly legit when they say that petrochemicals are going to be the future, because I'm not so sure if we do the common sense thing.
Yeah, so around here, single-use plastic grocery bags have been outlawed, so you don't have those anymore. And I'm pleased to report that after, that happened a couple of years ago, I'm finally remembering to take my grocery bags to the grocery store.
I think that's true with me too.
It took me so long to get used to it. And it was weird at first, I got to carry my own grocery bags. This is ridiculous. But I got some ones that fold up quite small, And yeah, so I finally can remember to bring them. If you do forget, they tend to have paper bags there now. 25 cents, you can buy a paper grocery bag. So my little story about plastic straws when I was 5 years old, you got to think back to a time. That's when soda pop came in glass bottles. Like the glass bottles were always rinsed and washed and refilled. Like it was many years later and it just seems normal now that, all of our drinks come in, single-use plastic bottles, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know, I guess it's a customer preference that they started trying that and it worked. Like people just bought into it.
Well, yeah, and it saved the drink companies money. I think that was the main reason for them doing it.
Right.
And as we sort of reported in the past, the beverage industry loves the idea of plastic recycling, and they've done a lot to promote the idea of plastic recycling because that's what they want to use.
Right.
And of course, it hasn't really worked out as well. Plastic straws, I think, are now phased out here. I think plastic straws are illegal, but you still often have the plastic top on your drink. If you do buy like a soda pop from a restaurant or something, it'll still have the plastic lid on it, which is disappointing. But I went to New York Fries the other day. It's a local French fry chain here in Canada.
Let's stop you for a moment here. What did you get?
Oh, I typically get the regular poutine.
Okay. Very Canadian of you.
Yeah, that's my usual. Anyway, New York Fries, they have them in sort of paper cartons, their drinks. So it's a bit like a milk carton.
Really?
So those ones don't have a plastic lid. It's all one piece, and you sort of have to unfold the top. Like there's a hole for your straw, but the top unfolds sort of like a old style milk carton.
Like a little one that you would carry to school and drink out of the spout, right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it's that shape, and they're all paper, so there's no plastic at all.
And how does soda pop taste in that format?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, doesn't
it's fine.
Well, okay, all right.
All right, from The Guardian, new subsidies for home batteries in Australia, and we know that Australia is big rooftop solar. We know that they're big on home batteries, but they have a program now that has been so popular that they've had to add another $5 billion to it. And this is the subsidy that they have in Australia for installing a home battery. And the quote from the Energy Minister, "We want more Aussie households to have access to batteries that are good for bills and good for the grid." So they have recognized that this is a step that they need to take. Because they have so much solar, they need somewhere for it to go when it's a super sunny day and you might end up with, too much power. So this has been available for 5 months and it's been super, super popular. So like I said, they added about $5 billion to it and they've tweaked a little bit how it works. So if you're in Australia, and you might want to look into this if you're interested in getting a home battery, but the idea being when the program first came out, people were kind of buying bigger batteries than they needed, because the subsidy would kind of allow any size. Now they're cutting it off. So like a 14 kilowatt hour battery is sort of a typical right size for a house. So you get the maximum subsidy of 30% typically when you do like a 14 kilowatt hour battery. And then as you go bigger than that, the subsidy decreases. But for most people, they can get that 30% subsidy on that if you get that sort of 14 kilowatt hour system. And then, so as you go, and you can put in as big a battery as you want, but basically the subsidies
there's
get
diminishing
smaller.
returns because your household only uses so much power, and because your roof is only so big. I don't know what the average square footage of a home in Australia is, but it's really big in the United States.
Yeah,
almost as big in Canada.
Yeah,
we tend to like our big houses here, but your roof space can do so much, so you can only store so much. You use some of it and you can store some of it. You can also get it cheaper at night, perhaps. I don't know. Does Australia have time of day pricing? We don't know that. It's not off the top of my head, but that would be another use of having the batteries to charge it up at night cheaply.
Yeah. And of course, you don't even need solar panels to put in a battery. And if you do have time of day pricing, just that in itself can save you a lot of money on your bill. But this program is, in fact, tied to solar panels. So the idea is if you're getting solar panels, then the subsidy applies to the home battery part of that.
So they've done a lot of these, haven't they? They've 1,000 a day, 1,000 batteries a day?
1,000
where
a day.
Where do they find the people to install these things?
The people and the supply, like somebody's making enough of these home batteries. But yeah, Australia's putting in 1,000 of these batteries every single day, which is amazing.
Yeah, and they're probably from a variety of brands, including Tesla Powerwalls and others from China.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, it gives you backup and power outages. It solidifies the grid because they can, I'm assuming these are allowed to be fed into the grid if needed.
Exactly. But yeah, the average savings for the average household, $600 to $900 a year just on the energy costs. But yeah, all those other benefits of, power when the power goes out and all that stuff.
So if you have solar panels, you have to feed it back into the grid in the middle of the day because you can't use all of it. And people aren't even home in the middle of the day most of the time. And you have to get a tariff, a feed-in tariff. You have to get paid for the electricity. And it doesn't benefit the utility to pay you the retail rate of that electricity because they don't pay that. They just pay the transmission. Part of your electricity is the generation of it, and part of it is the transmission. And the transmission is becoming bigger share of that electricity cost because, renewables and sensible places in the world are taking over. Not so much here, though. All right, Rivian has autonomy plans, autonomous vehicles, that is vehicles that drive themselves. Tesla is taking the approach of they want people to buy a car, have it drive itself, like you have that on your car. That's in beta still, getting better all the time. They're testing robotaxis in Austin with a driver and now possibly without a driver. Rivian is a startup EV maker that's making small pickup trucks, adventure vehicles, they call them, and SUVs. In the United States. They're coming out with more vehicles now, but they have 2 so far, and they've been a pretty good success story, I would say. They are trying to make the move into autonomy, so they sort of updated what they're going to be doing there.
A lot of the tech world imagines a future where we don't own cars at all. We're talking about fleets of robo-taxis that are summoned through an app, maybe no steering wheel or driver controls at all. But Rivian's in the camp that does see people owning their own cars in the future and being willing to pay top dollar for a software platform that allows the car to drive itself.
So Rivian founder RJ Scaringi says the future Rivian vehicles will use autonomy to handle everyday tasks like dropping owners at the airport. That's a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
Going to the airport at 5 in the morning or 4 in the morning.
Yeah. Just get your car to drop you off.
That would be nice. And then goes back home. Charges or reads the newspaper or whatever cars do. And, picking up your kids. Why couldn't I have been born later?
Yeah.
You know how much of my life I've spent picking up my kids? Good Lord. Of course, you get to talk to them and catch up with them. And that's the best time to do it is right then because they won't repeat it for your spouse when you get them home. Or running errands for you. Like you want to pick up the dry cleaning. They'll go get your dry cleaning for you. I like this stuff, So Scaringi envisions that cars could diagnose problems and get themselves to and from the service centers. You don't have to hassle. You're at work all day. Well, the car just drives, gets a software update or gets the wheels changed, get those winter tires. Another problem. If you're living in a snow country like us, that's no fun. You don't enjoy that, do you, Brian? It's a pain in the butt to go sit there at the tire shop and get your tires on every year and take it off. And it says it's not chasing robotaxis yet. It doesn't want to have their own robotaxi fleet as a business case, but it's instead focusing on gradual safety and convenience improvements for owners. At their AI Day on December 11th, 2025, the company announced it's ditching NVIDIA chips and building its own autonomy chip, manufactured by China's TSMC. The new autonomy compute module will deliver 4 times the performance of their current system. And starting in 2027, the Rivian R2, priced around $45,000 US, will include windshield-mounted LiDAR. Now, this is interesting to me because we don't see this in North America, but now we are. Tesla says we don't need that, and that is a big idea of Musk and his fanboys that Teslas will not need LiDAR, and this will allow the software will just be so smart using cameras like a human that it'll be human-like and it'll be able to spread around the world almost instantly once it gets to a certain point. And that's what they're counting on. But everyone else basically is using LiDAR. I think there might be one exception in China, but everyone else is using LiDAR, which is, I like LiDAR. I'm on the side of LiDAR because there was a bad crash in China where pedestrians were hit and that robotaxi has to shut down, but LiDAR doesn't miss anything. You're in a blizzard it can see through the blizzard. So it's pretty good system, but it costs money, and that's why Musk said he didn't want it on Teslas. But they are getting cheaper, and Waymo, one of the leading robotaxi companies in the world, if not the leading one, is saying that, well, over the cost of the per mile is pretty cheap for LiDAR. If you factor these electric vehicles doing 1 million miles or something, it doesn't, it's not much at all. But yeah, so you see these bumps, which are different than what we're used to in North America, on the windows at the top. It's on the outside. There's a bump on the outside, not just the camera under the glass, but a bump on the outside where the LiDAR has to be on the outside. And then there's little window washers on that LiDAR that keep it clean. And Rivian says modern LiDAR is cheaper and discreet. It's smaller. In other words, smaller. It's not a giant module anymore, and enables a superhuman 3D view of the world. Rivian plans hands-free, point-to-point driving, starting on highways and expanding over time. And they're going to charge $2,500 up front, which isn't terrible. I mean, they could charge you that for seat heaters, add-ons for cars. Actually, I mean, you paid what, 10 grand. So it's interesting that they're having this idea. I guess Musk says if you paid the 10 grand, what it was 10 grand, that you got a robotaxi, so you're buying your own business vehicle, that it's going to make you money. Whereas Rivian says, Rivian and other companies are just saying this is a cost for driving, just for you driving. Or they'll charge you $50 US a month for it as well, if you want. And that might be something I would do if I was, because I would only use it on vacation. I mean, you don't use it around town, do you?
I'm starting to, yeah.
You are.
It's getting so good. It's,
you told me, and we have evidence somewhere in the archives, that, James, I like to drive. I'm not going to use that. I'm one of these people who likes to drive. So why are you using it? You getting old,
I don't remember
right?
saying that.
No, you never do. You never do. I remember everything
also,
you say.
It just depends on how good it is. Like, once it gets to a certain point where it's so good, you just feel like, man, this is safer if I just let the computer do it, because it has 8 eyes. I only have 2. Its reaction time is faster than mine. I'd feel pretty stupid if I was driving it myself and ran into a tree when I could have just let the car drive.
Interesting. So your sphincters aren't all tensing up as you drive now? You're pretty relaxed about it?
Yeah, it's way, way better. Yeah. And it's even working in the snow now. Like it took a long time, but it's not, snow is still the biggest issue for it, but it's wild that it works at all. Like there's everything covered in snow. You can't see any lines. You can barely see the curb, and it can figure out where the hell it is and drive. Like it's amazing. Like it doesn't work as well as it does in the summer, but it's almost more impressive because of the obstacles that it has to overcome.
So one of your issues when using it was that you didn't want to annoy other people and create road rage because it would drive too cautiously. Has that been starting to be mitigated?
That's much better. Like it's still like at a 4-way stop, it's still much slower than I would like it to be. But like when you're at a red light and the light turns green, it takes off immediately. And it didn't used to do that. It used to have all of these kind of slight pauses. The slight pauses are all gone. Now, there's still times when I take over, like if there's somebody behind me and I don't want to piss them off, I just take over because I don't want to be too slow and have somebody annoyed.
Oh.
But no, it's very responsive now.
When did we do our test? Was it in the spring? I think it might have been in the spring.
Yeah, I don't remember.
And you put a student driver sticker on the car or something.
Yeah,
like that,
and I don't feel like I need that anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's interesting.
No, it's making progress. The other issue that Tesla claims with LiDAR is then what do you do if there's a disagreement? Because you essentially have then 2 different systems. If you've got cameras and LiDAR and they disagree with each other about what to do, how do you decide which one is correct?
Well, my thinking is that if there's an object there that one sees and the other doesn't, stop.
Yes, but sometimes they detect objects that aren't there.
Well, does LiDAR can do that? I mean, the camera certainly does, because there's been, emergency braking on highways a lot. That's been cleaned up for you, hasn't it?
Yeah, no, that basically doesn't exist. What I noticed on the last road trip is it will sometimes swerve for marks on the road. Like there'll be like a big black mark on the road.
Right.
And it will just kind of swerve around it because it thinks that it might be something. So, but with every update, this stuff gets better.
All right. Well, Volkswagen has been invested like $6 billion in Rivian, so they might explore some software opportunities. And I think it's a scary thing to invest in this when there's other people who've been doing it for years. Like, it's like, what makes you think that you're going to catch up real quick like that? Like, there's been a lot of people who've already fallen by the wayside because of that. Contact us. Stop everything now, people. Contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. All one word, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. We'd like to hear from you. And of course, this podcast is made possible from people who support us on Patreon. So thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. You'll get a shout out at the first show of the month. Those of you who are in the Clean Club or higher, visit patreon.com if you're on the fence, patreon.com/cleanenergyshow. You've been thinking about it for a while. Well, now's the time to join our Patreon and get our bonus podcast coming up next month. So next is the lightning round. It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
Australia reached more than 50% of its electricity coming from renewables for the second month in a row in November. And by the way, hydro is included in that at 5.8% of their energy generation for the grid. Ford is killing the F-150 Lightning, the electric pickup truck,
Wow.
the electric version of the most popular vehicle in North America of any kind. And it is replacing it with a series hybrid that they say most people will use electricity, though. It's going to have they're going to take the Ram approach with that. It will be electric. It'll have a fat battery to do most of what you want. But if you want to tow, then the gas engine kicks in. Now, I'm rarely wrong about things. I thought the Ford F-150 Lightning would be a success with fleets. It was not. Don't know why.
Yeah.
Our own city here bought a couple of them to test out. I thought, most fleets aren't towing, or if they are towing, they're towing within an urban area.
Yeah.
And that this would be big with construction people and companies that run fleets, and not good enough. I think it's just too expensive. The upfront cost was too expensive.
Yeah, you certainly see a few of them around here, but that just might be because F-150s are so damn popular that people will take any kind, including electric. But on this last road trip to Lake Louise, a couple of times saw Ford Lightnings charging at the Tesla chargers because they can do that now. So they definitely do exist around here, but I guess not in numbers that were worth it to Ford.
I saw a lot of them in the west coast of Canada in the summertime.
Yeah.
A lot. I was surprised because people don't drive pickup trucks there. They didn't have writing on them, so they were just individual owners who maybe wanted to do country driving in the mountains.
They're harder to spot. They have a slight difference in look from the regular gas-powered one.
I guess Ford has lost nearly $20 billion on its, fairly failed EV strategy. They have the Ford Mustang Mach-E.
Yeah.
I see a lot of those around, actually.
Quite a few of those, yep.
And if you see them right here, there got to be a lot in other places because we're a backwoods place here that's not really supporting. We're cold. Everyone has their own opinions on EVs.
Yeah, and there's kind of no way to do it without losing a bunch of money. You just hopefully don't lose so much money that the whole company goes bankrupt.
Chinese automaker BYD increased its battery warranty to 8 years or 250,000 kilometers. Now, most of our battery warranties are 8 years as it is, but they're not 250,000 kilometers.
Right.
Because that's about 31,000 kilometers a year or almost 20,000 miles. And people, I think the average in the United States is like 12, 13, 14,000 miles per year. So this has really gone beyond that if you do a lot of driving. And this is in Europe that they're doing this. And yeah, they want to increase sales because they've got more cars than they know what to do with. Chinese scientists designed the most efficient silicon solar panel ever. This is in a lab, of course, not out in the world yet, but is 27.81%. I think my panels are around 21.5% or something like that I got on the house 7-8 years ago. So that's approaching what people used to call the theoretical limit for solar, for PV, is that they'll never get past 28% or something like that. But they're finding ways of doubling up layers and cheating, basically, and getting more out of that square inch of panels. France just beat the world record for nuclear fusion. They ran a fusion reactor for 22 minutes, and it maintained a 90 million degree Fahrenheit or 50 million degree Celsius, which is about the same to me. It's about the same. for 1,337 seconds or more than 22 minutes. So a new record for fusion. And as I mentioned before the show, Brian and I were talking about this, Roomba, iRobot, they're declaring bankruptcy because of competition.
Yeah.
Could this be a warning for the auto industries in North America being supplanted by better tech, better manufacturing from China?
Yeah, well, Roomba, they were the originals in home robot vacuum cleaners. So they were the early adopter. They were the early mover. They had tons of advantages. But of course, when stuff like that gets popular, other people figure out how to do it, perhaps better and cheaper.
Yeah, they've been around since the early 90s. And I will say I bought one on refurbished from a refurbishment store. It's probably the first electric vehicle I owned as an adult, when you think about
Roomba,
it.
yeah.
The Roomba. So scientists are calling the recent flooding in Sumatra an extinction-level disturbance for the Tapanuli orangutan, the rarest great ape on Earth. And there's fewer than 800 left, and this flooding due to climate change is an extinction-level disturbance, this flooding. The European Union agrees that legally binding target. The European Union has agreed to a legally binding target to cut emissions by 90% by 2040. So they're scaling back their combustion vehicle ban from 2035, but they are working on climate. And I think, honestly, 2035 is still 10 years away.
Yeah.
I mean, who's going to want to buy a combustion vehicle? Do we even need government policy at that point?
Yeah.
You know, maybe the libertarians can relax and just buy the steam engine they want to buy. So UK energy costs are set to halve, that is to cut in half by 2050, says the system operator. And that's because of renewables.
Yeah.
And here we say, well, renewables are too expensive.
Yeah.
We can't do them. So they'll raise your energy bills. And what they're saying is they'll have your energy bills by 2050.
Yeah.
Which is the target that we're all shooting for in the climate.
They've been massively modernizing the grid in the UK and replacing inefficient things with efficient things. And guess what? That is going to be better for everybody's bills in the future.
In the United States, a federal judge rules a ban on new wind projects is illegal. Well, quelle surprise! Paris just opened its first urban gondola line. When was the last time you were in Paris? Maybe you can try this out next time you're there. Do a report for us.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's got 5 stations. It's connected to the metro and the BRT. It is 4.5 kilometers long, the longest in Europe. And they're thinking of doing one of these in Vancouver to one of the university up on the mountain there, the Simon Fraser.
Yeah.
It's an odd thing, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, when I was in Telluride for the film festival, they have a sort of a local gondola is one of their biggest public transit things. But, because of the changes.
This is new. This is,
yeah.
Yeah, this is something I've kind of trying to wrap my head around because, well, we're flat here. We'll never have one here, but have, Star Trek transporting before we get them here. But it's an 18-minute ride from end to end. And this week, Tesla Charging, the Tesla Charging Network opened its North America's northernmost supercharger in Fairbanks, Alaska, completing the EV charging corridor between Anchorage and Fairbanks, the 2 largest centers in Alaska. It's time for a CES Fast Fact from The Guardian. Food and fossil fuel production is causing $5 billion of environmental damage per hour. I should have told you to sit down. That's a thinker. And another one here, 39 countries have reached an EV sales share larger than 10% in 2025, a third of which are outside Europe. So that's quite a lot of the major countries in the world have hit the 10% mark, and we are expecting 2025 to be 25% of vehicle sales worldwide for single vehicle, passenger vehicles to have a plug, to be either EVs or plug-in hybrids, which means fossil fuel use down. In 2019, there was only 4 countries that had reached the 10% milestone. So, yeah, that's come a ways. And finally this week, a new report from Ember. Ember Energy Research shows that grid-scale battery storage has become cheap enough to fundamentally change what solar power can do, and to put it in direct competition with fossil fuels. Based on real-world auctions in Italy, Saudi Arabia, and India, this is auctions for, we want to build, a gigawatt of solar. How much is it going to cost? They auction it off to see who comes in lowest.
Yep.
And Ember finds that large, long-duration battery energy storage systems now cost About $125 per kilowatt hour installed, and delivering a levelized cost of storage at just $65 per megawatt hour. And at these prices, batteries can economically shift large amounts of solar from daytime into evening and night. Storing half of a day's solar output adds only $33 per megawatt hour to the cost of solar generation. So if that happens, solar's cheap, getting cheaper, batteries cheap, getting cheaper, we're at an inflection point is what we're trying to say here. With global average solar prices around $43 per megawatt hour, this results in dispatchable solar power at roughly $76 per megawatt hour, which is pretty cheap, and compares to fossil fuel generation, not just during the day, but all day, because dispatchable means you can use it whenever you want to. If you got a peak when people come home from work, or if the grid needs it for whatever reason, it can dispatch it as needed. Now, that cost is already competitive with new fossil fuel generation, especially gas plants, reliant on imported LNG. So if you have a gas plant and you have to import that LNG, it is already competitive. Here, we've got our own natural gas in the area, so it's cheap, and that's one reason why we don't have renewables. But that's going to be displaced. We know the trajectory of this.
Yeah.
The government does not know the trajectory of anything, but by the time some of these plants get built, they'll be obsolete because of the trajectory of prices dropping. The sharp drop in storage costs is driven not just by cheaper batteries, but by longer lifetimes of these batteries, which we've talked about on the show. If you've got a battery that lasts 30 years instead of 10, well, the cost per unit of electricity that it stores and delivers back and forth gets really cheap. And that's happening with sodium-ion batteries, although that's going to take a while to scale up. So battery prices have gone down like 40% this year.
Yeah.
And they're expecting, or last year they went down 40%, and they're expecting, I don't know if it'll be 40, but it could be.
Yeah.
So we'll probably have those numbers early in the new year. That's a lot. And if that, that's bad news if you got an oil well in your backyard, because things are going to be tough for you guys. Solar is no longer just cheap daytime power. Paired with batteries, it becomes reliable anytime electricity capable of displacing fossil fuels at scale. And that's what we're hoping for. That's what the show is about, stuff like that.
All right. Well, that's it for this week. You can find us on social media, Clean Energy Pod. Visit us at patreon.com/cleanenergypod and cleanenergyshow@gmail.com if you want to send us an email. And super important to hit that subscribe or follow button wherever you are listening to this podcast.
Yeah, thanks to Green Bastard and Brett Routley, who support us in the executive level of our Patreon. You guys get a shout out every week for giving us so much money. Thank you for doing that. And thank you to all who are supporting our podcast in whatever way you do. We'll see you again in about 6 days. It might be a day early next week because of the holidays. So stay tuned.
Yeah, see you next week.